That's much better.
No, I don't think so.
I'm going to take a few stills of my stills camera too. Steven Stills.
Yes, of course.
Steven Stills is still percolating.
Yeah,
Did you see Rod McEwen
I don't have a copy
down
of
here
it.
today?
He left the same day as my good brother Danny Rubin from Idlewild. I found out a couple of amazing people. Danny Rubin worked for the LA Free Press for a while with Bruce Denny.
Are you the Event Horizon Press?
He left his spot.
Nancy is. Nancy.
Same day as Rod McEwen.
I mean.
Is that the only thing she's published under that name?
Yeah.
Here. Well, yeah, okay. I'll move over here on the floor.
Yeah, where's the-
Out of the way.
Which icon
The
is it?
picture, huh?
Show me which icon.
Here. And then set that right there.
Okay, can you get both of this at the same time here? Sonny?
I'm going to tell you in a second.
Oh, okay.
Well, this is what you got to make it work, right?
With the blessing of the Lucky Charms here. Green, made in China, hemp. Things are going to hold it up.
It's book publishing, yeah?
Yes,
The book publishing.
And notice you're on the cover of her book.
Oh, yeah, nepotism.
It's called
Nepotism.
Enterprise.
At,
You publish what?
10 minutes ago.
At Hustler.
A memoir.
I never read Who's to Say What's Obscene.
Oh, really?
Oh, good.
Huh?
Really?
Nope.
So that's what artists are doing now? Well, he has a book in his hand.
Just ruin some acting. I'm destroying my new LA Free Press.
Oh, well.
I don't know, I
Okay.
will show you. This is
When did you meet Nancy?
1984. So did you look and that catches both of us here?
Whose book?
Does the camera catching?
Oh, it's getting you and art just fine. So,
Okay.
where did the LA Free Press go? Stevens got it?
No, they're over there by the TV, I think.
Oh, had it the whole time. Okay. Yeah, Sunny Sundowner here with Deborah Tobin, Stephen Finger, Nancy, and Paul Krassner are actually just giving the last name, but I don't know
Where is
that
he?
is.
He's looking at her book in the
And she's
hallway.
right behind you. And we're here with Art Kunkin today. It was wonderful. Bob Marley's 70th birthday, February 6th, 2015 on the Gregorian calendar. And some very synchronous kismet occurred. Just to bring a little instant nostalgia before we get into the nostalgia for the future, as Wavy Grady says. It was in the Pleasure Fair versus Ventura cover, Stephen, right? May 5th, 1967. Is that where you saw that? No, Paul Krassner. Benefit for Lenore Candell. Yeah, 1967. And then just synchronicity, I got this out of the mailbox today. And
Are you talking with the
I'm
camera?
talking to the camera. You are listening to what I'm saying right now. In the future, though, you're listening to it right now.
Okay.
Well, thank you for listening. So now, I have, with Stephen Finger's help, have found page 16 of the May 5th, 1967 Los Angeles Free Press half-page ad that Stephen said, "Oh look, there's JFK Uncensored." See story on page 9. Paul Krassner, realist ringleader at large in LA. And it's probably the first time in 4 decades that Paul Krassner has seen this ad, I'm guessing, but he said, "I don't think that's my photo. I don't think it's a photo of me. Let me get my glasses."
I looked at like that.
Who is that, Art Kunkin? It looks like a
No, that's not him.
Wolfman Prosper.
That's that photo.
One time, there was a, oh no, no, that was something else. My memory is leaking out of my pores.
Me too.
But you know, names come first to forget. But I know I can think of this, and then I think of the first letter of it, because when you always, you know, when you're a kid, you learn from the alphabet and spell your name or spell somebody's name, and so you remember what the first letter is, and then I'll remember maybe the first name, and then Nancy will remember the last name. So it's a team memory.
I remember the
That's
papers.
great. Team
No, I
memory.
don't have a copy of this. I want to buy a copy. I'll buy a copy from you.
I'll see if there's any.
Huh?
You know, she just did the Video Freaks are having a museum show there, opening tomorrow.
I saw the flyer here, Paul.
Of that?
I saw the flyer here. We're all video freaks.
Oh,
Is that it?
That was last year.
That was last year. No, this
Oh.
is in upstate New York at a museum. It opens tomorrow. It's going to be there for 22 weeks. And then there's also going to be a documentary about the Video Freak. So, you know, it's like the second coming,
Wow.
more or less.
Back to this for a moment. I didn't mention that this was an ad for cost $2 to attend this benefit with Paul at the Workmen's Circle Center on Friday, May 5th, 8:45 p.m. A benefit for the Love Book Defense Fund. Now, I guess Lenore Kandel, who I recently saw the day we did the Be-In celebration of 48 years ago at the Golden Gate Park Be-In. There's a wonderful YouTube now, hour-long YouTube with a lot of classic footage of the day at the Golden Gate Park. Lenore Kandel not only speaks to the crowd, huge polo field full of people, but she did a Buddhist Gayatri mantra or something. And so Lenore Kandel's there giving a blessing to all the hippies, and that was probably right before, that was 60, right at the same time, 67, same year. A couple months later, she's fighting charges of obscenity, etc. on her Lenore Kandel's
Obscenity.
love book.
Obscenity.
Okay, and was that before or after Allen Ginsberg, who was also at the BN that day, in his Howell trial and the obscenity trials?
Oh, that was much earlier.
That was much earlier.
Much
You
earlier.
know, I wasn't there, so I'm just getting caught up now. So, and then Lenore Kandel was dismissed of all charges, or what happened with that trial? This was a benefit
I
for
think
her.
that's what happened.
Yeah.
As I recall. And the same thing with Ginsburg.
You want to come join us, Steve? Have a seat here and talk with us?
No.
You don't? Okay.
Well, I do, but
You should, really, because I'm sure you can add a lot to it, the conversation. Okay, good. Well, we discussed the past, now we can talk about the present, right? When I did a Be-In celebration at the Picnic Cafe 8-9 years ago, when I first started hanging out there in Joshua Tree, I had Art Kunkin and my friend Baird Bryant, who you might know from Idlewild, the cinematographer that did the cemetery scenes in Easy Rider, and he did the
I
dog
with
moms,
Baird.
Pride of Compassion. Baird is on the other side now, 5 or 6 years.
I thought so, yeah.
But I invited him down, but a big snowstorm came. And I'll probably tell this story as many times as Ted Quinn talks about meeting Art Kunkin and confessing his selling LA Free Press from the newsstand and buying candy with the profits. But I tell this story over and over now about Baird couldn't make it, but he sent his regards. And I probably took too long in the introduction talking about my friend Yogi John Franzoni and how I met Art Kunkin with him in Fairfax and blah, blah, blah. But then I turned to Art and I said, well, Art, can you tell us a little bit about the Love-In, the Be-In experience? And he was so curt with me. He just said, well, do you want to talk about the past or what we should do now? So with that, we can talk about the past.
I still want to say that.
That's good. I love you for it. We can get back into the past, dump rumple foreskins column and all this and all that. But I would like to start off with the now, if I could. We were up late last night studying Jeremy Scahill and the war on the current media, or the current war on the media. So if I could get you to just pose a statement, like
No.
with your.
This is my job here. I'm here to Well, it's a
You
good
did the
question.
homework, that's why I'm
No, I
asking.
didn't.
Go ahead.
I
Go ahead.
refreshed. Well, I just think that maybe some sort of commentary on what is happening now to journalists and to free press, you know, and the hypocrisy of a free press or the First Amendment.
And how
That's
Obama
what makes it.
administration is pulling the wool over everybody's eyes with this gay rights and that thing and abortion or whatever, when the real issues is a free press that's being totally
We
irrelevant.
can't have a democracy if we don't have a free press.
And we really don't now with what's going on behind the scenes, with the drone killings and all this stuff that people aren't finding out about. Go on.
Nobody's putting you in jail. Have you noticed? You're walking around.
They're trying to put Edward Snowden in jail, and they all these people that Jeremy Scale was mentioning in these.
Well, he did
videos.
nasty things.
Right. Well, actually, I disagree with you, unfortunately. I think the press is freer today than ever before because today, anybody can publish. I mean, that's a plus and a minus. There's a lot of people publishing who have no journalistic standing.
I agree, but here's the difference.
Well, let him finish his things.
The difference is democracy now. Amy Goodman has all these people like Jeremy Scahill talking about, and Edward Snowden talking about what's going on. But that is not CNN getting to the masses in America and the world. That's just a small fragment because it's so controlled by Murdoch and all the corporatocracy.
Amy Goodman is worldwide, and she's instant. And
How many
so,
people watch her?
And so is the 14-year-old who gets on with an opinion and pushes a button to their 1,800 Facebook friends. There is more freedom of the press than ever before. In the old days, speaking from what I've read, if there was a protest, say in front of an army recruitment station, you're talking 400, maybe 1,400 people, and you're hoping to get on the news. Now, every one of those people, if there were 400, can broadcast instantly around the world. There's live streaming, so whether the network comes down or not, remember there's 3 networks. You know, back in the old days, there were 3 networks and PBS. And now there's so many networks, you know, when you buy cable, you don't know where to start.
Well, the discourse is watered down, and
No.
there's a lot of.
No, in fact, the discourse is not even filtered. That's why you have a 14-year-old getting up and talking about something as if she knows what she's talking about, as if she's researched it, as if she has some
Right.
perspective on it, as if she has some craft with words. No, I think the press is freer than ever. But what I do think, what I think has been taken away, is that there is so much of it that you as an individual don't know where to focus. Now I came to art.
Very penetrating. What you're saying is very true.
When I came to art, when I pulled the plug on the LA Free Press because we had moved it all the way up to the first 500,000 websites, and it had more readership, more minutes readership than the Alt-Net and the LA Times. Yes, they had an average of 4 to 4.5 minutes. We had an average of 9 to 12 minutes. But what I was saying to Art was, in the old days, there was one door that people could gather in front of and complain. And I think what's happened over these years is the government has taken to a strategy, as many other groups have, of putting up door after door after door after door after door. So if there's 1,000 people and they're spread over 3,000 doors, there's hardly a crowd in front of any one of them. So it doesn't look as if there's a concentrated opposition. And in truth, there isn't enough opposition to push that particular door down, but there are many, many more people expressing their opinion. For my generation, who thinks that the younger generation is apathetic, all you really need to do is get onto one of their channels and you will be surprised, in most cases, how many things they post and repost and retweet and get behind.
About what?
About everything. See, and that again is where I say if there's any fatal flaw in this, is there's too many stories. There are too many things and too many variations and too many aspects for there to be a momentum. Even when Occupy, which is certainly of this generation, the largest thing comparable to a revolution, over 500,000 people, 500,000 people coming out and being in parks. The major criticism was they didn't have a single message, they had too many messages, and therefore they didn't know what they were doing. Right now, if anything needs to happen so that you could see that there's a free press, is some coalescence on an issue so that you can see, yes, there is a strong, vital press doing something instead of what looks like a hodgepodge.
And Occupy won't likely happen again because since that time it has come out that the FBI and other agencies coordinated across the nation to squash it behind the scenes, much like COINTELPRO did over the past few decades with all the other movements. But now there's NDAA where we can be detained indefinitely without charges, just like the people in Gitmo, Intimacy, and on and on. I just have to say that I have a real strong rebuttal I'd love to give you, Stephen, but I don't want to, because I want to focus back to what Art and Paul have to say about it. But I have to say that I have trouble watching these things that we watched over the time about the freedom of the press and the war on journalism, because it stirs up my anger so much that I have trouble, especially late at night before you go to sleep. It's not a good time to watch this stuff. But as a Buddhist practitioner, meditator, I this is my challenge to stay calm when I see a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes in the Obama administration still. With the drone killings and the guy in Yemen, the journalist that was imprisoned just for reporting the story, and then Obama said, no, don't let him out. And so he stayed languished in his cell for so much longer because of Obama's call to the Yemen dictator. All kinds of stuff that we're finding out just tries my anger button, pushes my vipassana and mindfulness meditation has to come into effect, or I would probably be, shooting off an AK-47 at the White House myself. I get so upset with this stuff.
Let me just see
Yeah,
if I can
Smelling salts. I'm passing out here.
if I can bring this to one particular issue. With the free press, and one of the things we're here to talk about is the history of the free press and what its contribution was and how it moved ahead.
And the Realist.
Yes, and the paper had at one point slightly over 100,000 issues printed a week.
125.
125,000. Okay, and right at this moment, if Art puts something on the net, he will have 10 times that. So distribution is not only larger today, but the cost is nil. Okay.
Well, my what do you call it? Credo was in the Realist to let's see, how did I word it? To run myself out of business, because my credo was to communicate without compromise. And now on the internet, that can be done, and it is done. Communicating without compromise. And Tony mentioned Edward Snowden. I mean, the documentary about him may win an Oscar. And no government's going to try and stop that. They're not going to bust him, but they can't stop the communication about that is in the documentary. And there are maybe millions of bloggers, but a lot of stuff goes to the top, and so it's not just a dancing Korean who goes viral. It's something that is factual rather than entertainment.
And that lack of filter, while what it means is everybody gets their shot. The unfortunate thing is, although there are some sites like Smoking Gun and Fact Checker where you can find out if things are correct or not,
Right.
there's just such a downpour of information.
And there's so much the line I use, because there's so much skepticism that I can't even trust Snopes anymore.
Right.
Even though they are the Bible for what's true or fake.
Right. So the bottom line to that, I think, is the press is freer And because there's no regulation, and of course you don't want regulation on the free press, but you do want writers with qualification. And you have unqualified writers.
And
who are
young people,
contributing to
they
that.
don't watch CNN anyway. They watch online.
Right.
You know, it's changing, but it's still the press, and it's free on the internet. You know, there are things, you know, like threats, and that's one thing. And that's understandable.
I cannot be one sentence to show how they're still in control of the media.
All right, you can offer me a
That
sentence,
the Congress is all Republican again.
well, that's what the vote was.
Right.
Because of the corporatocracy and their Koch brothers are spending $1 billion on the 2016 election, and it's going to happen again, like it did with the Congress, because of the money spent with all the lies and everything, making people believe the Wizard of Oz story, you know?
But when you get on tonight, when you get on the internet tonight, neither of those brothers are going to call you up, okay? And it's highly unlikely your site's going to get shut down. And if you do have a circle of friends, they are all going to hear that. And if you put up a website and you know how to get a search engine optimized, it will go farther. The press is freer than ever. And I do agree with you, of course, that journalists are being penned up and kept from doing what they want. The unfortunate thing is they are journalists. They actually can report the story. You know, what we need to do is create more of them so that there are too many to shut down.
Can't argue with that.
So we can't bemoan the ones that are locked up. Certainly we want to work on their behalf, but we need to sprout more of them.
And the concept of the the LA Free Press in the recent issue, well, from the start, but even in the 2000, when did it re-emerge in 2005, 2006, and you made every reader a reporter. You reenacted that saying.
Yes, but that was a long, long time ago, that phrase.
2005, 10 years ago? I'm just saying that the original Free Press had that saying, didn't it?
Well, there's your source.
The original Free Press, did you say every reader is a reporter?
In other words, what you see today as the internet was there a long time ago. The unfortunate thing is that even though art, and if it's not on record, it should be, art came out with a printing process that not only lowered the cost, but was brilliant.
I didn't invent it, I used it.
Right, offset printing, yes.
For newspapers.
Around what year, do you remember?
I was the first one.
That's awesome, Art. Do you remember what year you did that?
64.
64, right? When the Free Press started.
So that reduced the cost, which meant that across the nation...
That's why the underground press flourished.
That's right.
Art Gutenberg Kunkin.
Huh.
No, but I didn't invent, I just used.
But that was one of the steps that made media available, because the cost went down and because more writers could write, because they didn't have to go through that interview process of getting on. It was a lot of students on campus. It was happening in small cities. It is comparable to what you see with the internet. Okay? Again, and I have to say also, it's not like Art interviewed every one of these journalists and made sure they had college credits. But he was fortunate that at that time, many of the people who were writing were in college. Okay? And I think more educated than the massive people who are on the net now.
Well, Paul Krassner was one of those writers. Did you go to college?
Oh yes, all but one course.
All but one course to get a degree, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, you went from Baruch, right, to college, right to your first job.
While in my senior year, I figured I didn't want to have I didn't need any degree for what I wanted to do. My parents weren't happy about that, but because only 3 points
Right.
more, and
Wow.
I got that I wouldn't have put it on my wall anyway.
True rebel. You are a true rebel.
No, I wasn't rebelling.
Against your
I was
parents?
trying to be. No, it wasn't that. It was just I didn't want to take the course. I didn't care about getting a degree.
Was it because of the course, the content?
That was part of it, but it was also, I was already working for the Independent, which was a forerunner to the whole alternative press. And I knew I would rather work there than the New York Times. So that was
Lyle Stewart.
Lyle Stewart, yeah. And I don't know what path my life would have taken had I not met him. So those are turning points, really. And
How much later did the Mad magazine experience?
well, he got a letter from Bill Gaines, who was the publisher of Mad, and saying that he was in awe of the Independent. And then Lyle wrote him back, and then they became friends, and then Lyle became his business manager, and we moved down to Lafayette Street in what became known as the Mad Building, and we were on the same floor as them. And then I did a few freelance things for Mad, and but they were turned down. A few were published, but a few suggestions. The editor that said that they had 1.5 million readers and one thing I did was where it was the parts. It was a thing. I just wrote a script, and then an artist would do it for their format, and it was the little ads that were in the back of magazines, and one of them was to get, and then I had olive oil was getting falsies. They sold falsies like little rubber.
The comic book character, olive oil.
Yeah, well, she was flat-chested, obviously, not sexist.
Popeye's girlfriend.
And so, and the editor said, no, it was for grown-ups. And so I said to Bill Gaines, are you, I guess, because they just, at that point turned out into 1.25 million subscribers. I said, I guess you don't want to change horses in midstream. And he said, not when the horse has a rocket up its ass. And I remember those words were imprinted on my brain, but there was no adult satirical magazine then.
This is why you started the Realist.
It was one of the big reasons, yeah.
This is what the first issue of Realist was, 55 or something?
58, yeah. And so that was that, and in fact, Time magazine just had a story about the Charlie magazine in Paris,
Right.
what happened there, and Time had a story saying that not the Onion or Mad or National Lampoon or Monocle, but that the Realist was the closest thing to what the French magazine was doing. Except mine was 50 years ago.
Wow.
So I think that you should just change the name of that to the Freer Press.
Well, one of the reasons that we are keeping it still, even with Los Angeles instead of worldwide, is what's remarkable is that you can take a cover story from the LA Free Press 50 years ago and put it against today's news. And what you will find is not just comparables, but you will find, what I hope people find, is that they've been doing the wrong thing. If 50
Who
years...
has been doing the wrong thing?
The population. If after 50 years they continue to follow the same path, and 50 years later you can publish a story with the same problem, they obviously haven't done something right. 50 years ago, there was a headline, will the next riot be started by whites? Okay? Well, if you were to take that and just explore that, as an exercise, you would find some amazing comments on society. First, it's surprising that the blacks have come back and they're in the news because they were gone for a long time. Okay. Second, the whites don't want to hear this.
Is that until Michael Jackson died? I'm sorry.
The whites don't want to hear this, but in LA, They're the minority. My gosh, how embarrassing is that? I'm white and I've got, I should be operating off of minority rights. I'm not because I'm white. But the reality of that is, if they did have minority rights on them, those social inequalities, they probably would be the next ones to riot. And I don't even know if whites are ready for that. If they're ready to say, yes, we are rioting, we are going to burn storefronts, I don't think they can picture it. But the point is that front page is certainly could be a catalyst for an important discussion. And that's just one cover. I mean, there's cover after cover after cover where things that seemingly are forgotten are actually still present in this society and have not been handled because we have gone along a path which really does not make a change. We've covered after cover. So anyhow, so that's why it's kept that way, so that when they see that cover, what I'm hoping is that they hit a tipping point. Sometimes somebody reads a story and goes, oh my gosh, it's been going on for years. And they may have some angst and they may sign a petition. But when you see something and you go, oh my gosh, it's been going on for 45 years. Like for instance, when the BP story came out, okay, you could substitute the Standard Union story, okay, and it's exactly the same. That they asked to drill additional wells to take off the pressure, that every regulation board they went to, they found out they had executives on. When oil poured on the beach, they released the prisoners to cover it up. It's a duplicate. Except, surprisingly, the public sued the Secretary of the Interior. We didn't even do that this time.
Just a thought I had that I thought possibly you could follow the lead of the Grateful Dead. When Jerry Garcia left to the other side, they started calling themselves the Dead, and you could just simply call this the Freep.
We could.
I was hoping to get at least a chuckle out of you guys,
Well, I thought it was serious.
As long as it's not the dead Freep, yeah.
Not the Dead Freep, ever-living Freep.
The grateful Freep.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, do you remember the year you first started your column, Rumple Foreskin, in the Free Press?
Oh, that must have been
Freep?
it was in the early 70s, I think.
Weren't you on KGO first with that as a radio show?
Oh, in San Francisco, it was KGO was the ABC station, let's see, what was it? KPFX, I think it was the FM station, and that was the show I had.
And was Scoop Nesker on that station too?
No, he was on KSAN.
KSAN.
Yeah. So that lasted 7 months. But whatever job I had, I always figured either they're going to fire me or I'll quit. And I just stayed on to see which it would be. That's what happened at Hustler. I knew I would get fired from that, or I would quit.
How long were you at Hustler?
6 months.
That's another thing you two share in common, working for Larry Flint, you could say. Would you say you were working for Larry Flint for a while?
Oh, yeah.
And you were too?
Paul and Larry hired me.
Oh, they both hired you.
Well, because he was going to publish the Realist.
Yeah.
And he had taken over the LA Free Press in the early 70s too.
Yeah. And, but then he got shot, and that affected the whole cash flow. The debtors wanted the money and the creditors wanted the money that was owed to them, and the ones that were owed to Hustler held back because and so his wife Althea took over while he was still in the hospital, and because the cash flow was so terrible, they were dropping one thing after another, and they dropped the Realist. I had to fire my staff, and Art was one of them.
Ouch.
So I was relieved, to tell you the truth, because the first thing that the first cover I was going to have on the issue that he was going to do was three biggest images were the swastika, Coca-Cola, and Mickey Mouse. And so the cover was going to be a picture of artwork of Mickey Mouse with the swastika on his arm drinking Coca-Cola. And Althea said, "Have you talked to the lawyers about this?" And I never talked to the lawyers until after it was published. And I said no, and I thought, uh-oh. So I was relieved because I wasn't in charge, really.
It was a can of worms that didn't have to get opened.
Well, it was, pick a metaphor, any metaphor, but it was, but I just remember, I went in there to take notes, and she said, "Paul, come to my office," and she had good ideas, like, and as I was saying, the same issues now that there wasn't an article about the lunches for kids in school that they were serving often. And I would write down, and then figure out somebody to write it. And so here she said, "Paul, I have to fire you," and I wrote down "fired." And she was sad that she had to do it because the money people told her, and I was getting more money than I could ever have thought of, and it stopped. But I was, I didn't say that, I was just paying off debts. But the point is that
90,000.
Huh?
90,000.
That was it, yeah. And
90K.
and
I have to interject, at least you didn't lose your job overseas.
to overseas.
Yeah, I mean, your job didn't get sent overseas.
Oh, no. But I was relieved, I went into my office, closed locked the door, put the radio on, and started dancing. "Thank you, Althea, for firing me." And then I called a few friends and family to let them know, so they heard it from me rather than in the media. And when I called Ken Kesey, he said, "Oh, that's great. We're going to Grateful Dead and play the Pyramids. And why don't you come with us?" And
I have to interject something. I was just going to ask you about that. So this is cosmic because you said you were dancing in your office, but you told me in the previous interview at Halos here in Desert Hot Springs 5 or 6 years ago that the first time you danced in public was with Bill Graham backstage in the Pyramids in
yeah.
72. So now you're contradicting that story.
No,
I'm sorry. You were dancing in private after Althea fired you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was alone.
Yes. That's the.
Oh, yeah. And Bill Graham said to me back there that that was the first time he danced in the public, and I said, "Me too." So I mean, that was just the power of that context.
If you want to call backstage public, because it's kind of a.
No, it was on stage.
Oh, you were on stage.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
the pyramids were off in the background with the full moonrise.
all of that. Well, no, there was an eclipse of the moon, and the little kids they said they thought it was the Grateful Ted. and they
That came
had
after the interview.
little rocks in a can as they were shaking to bring the moon back.
Wasn't cannabis involved?
Oh, cannabis.
With you and Bill Graham?
Yeah, he gave me a cookie. I was loaded, and I was already on acid, which was smuggled into Egypt in a Pisces little bottle. So who would have thought? So, but it was it was interesting because at the same time, Sadat I think was in America at Camp David with Jimmy Carter. Trying to have a peace, and we were kind of like ambassadors. So that was I was pleased. I would have missed that if I had stayed at Krassner.
Wow. Let me just put some perspective into this. You mentioned Althea mentioning the lunch program.
Yeah.
And one thing that you would be surprised to see, if you were of this generation, is that the Black Panthers are the ones who started the free food
Free
program
breakfast, yeah.
for children. So, you know, you hear that and your picture of the Black Panthers is certainly different. And you have to wonder what happened to that program now, you know. And the other thing is that in the newspaper you mentioned, Easy, there is a tiny 1-inch ad where the Merry Pranksters, which you're a member of, ran an ad looking for a house that they could all come to because they were going to set up the acid test parties. So it's that kind of history that you'll see in the paper that, you know, you can relate to things that seem to have just disappeared today or should be remembered today. So, but it would have been interesting to see the Realist come out again under Larry Flynn.
Oh, well, you know, I just wasn't happy there because, you know, the moment she said to me, have you asked the lawyers about this yet? And the lawyers always, you know, they're on a retainer. They want to just stay out of court and prevent it. So, you know, I didn't want to have to, I didn't have to please anybody but the readers. And they trusted me not to be afraid of offending them. Until, of course, I published something that stepped on their toes, and they said, now you've gone too far.
With the satire and the...
Whatever it was.
I mean, the stories that you fabricated, like the LBJ, necrophilia...
Oh, well, in that one, you know, I just put a little notice saying, when canceling your subscription, please be sure to include your zip code. Because I knew that it would upset some people.
Did many people cancel their subscription to the Realist?
Some, yes. And others thought it was brilliant. Everybody, you know. Others thought it was obscene. And years later, you know, they would tell me, oh, God, I finally realized what you were doing. You know, it broke through.
And at the time, there were certain people, even in Washington, D.C., who questioned whether that story was fabrication or if there was any truth to it.
Well, I just never copped to it. They would ask me, now you made that up, didn't you? And I would say, no. And they were furious that I wouldn't admit that it was a hoax. But they knew it wasn't true. I mean, some people thought it was true just for a moment, just for that one moment.
Guilty.
You really? You really believe that happened?
I was dropping my job.
Well, you weren't the only one, yeah. But that was the point, because I led up to it with true stuff, then semi-true stuff, stuff that reporters knew.
I read it 30 years after you wrote it.
Uh-huh. Oh, it wasn't as shocking.
Right.
Well, it was still shocking if you didn't know. But, no.
You're a good fabricator, but you have, what's your famous line about fiction, journalism? And
Oh, I wouldn't label an article as satire or journalism, because I didn't want to, I wanted readers to discern for themselves what was true and what was a satirical extension of the truth.
you have some other great line about journalists and journalism.
Oh, well, there was a thing I taught at the Free University in New York, and it was called Journalism and Satire, and How to Tell the Difference. And
Your famous saying is along that line. It's escaping me right now. Can we talk more? Since Art Kunkin is here, at the Beatnik Lounge the other day, we were trying to get him to talk about the being, and he said, "Well, ask me questions." Trying to think of a question we can ask Art right now about Paul Krassner's involvement. You've been interjecting your memories somewhat. But do you remember, how about the first time you met Paul Krassner? Do you remember that?
I was a Realist reader.
You were a reader of his paper?
Before the Free Press started.
as I recall, it was I would travel around the country and do benefits for underground papers, and I think I did one for the Free Press.
Probably.
That's why you were called the father.
Flowers I recall.
Wow.
And you gave me a bouquet of flowers. And one thing that stands out in my mind, well, one thing that Art published was the addresses of
narcotic agents.
narcotic agents. And that was on the cusp of
I said you sent me a telegram.
Oh, what did they say?
Something about why did you do that?
Well, no, I thought it was on the cusp of courage and foolhardiness. It just didn't balance it. And then the other thing I remember offhand was when there was the War is Over demonstration. And Phil Oakes did a story, a song about that, and helped organize that in a park, which was where Muhammad Ali was here, and he would only give autographs to people if they could do it on their draft card. And then there was the march to Century City. This was before the two twin towers were built there, and that's when we were all sitting on the ground in front of the hotel. Remember the name of that hotel?
Century City.
This was before the two. This was before the two.
And LBJ was on the balcony looking
Right,
out over
and
the
the
crowd.
Supremes were singing to him.
Like Mario.
And so, and then we were told to disperse. People didn't disperse, and there were cops went wild, hitting people in wheelchairs. Even. And so I remember I suggested to Art that he knew right away that we have a special issue then, and I wrote a piece to that. And there were great photos.
I don't have it with me, but
Yeah,
That's what I was looking for. I have it somewhere on my desk.
It's issue 153 and a half.
What? Is it what?
Issue number
153 and a half.
And a
I
half.
have.
And the 153 the next week incorporated that special. And as you said, the police went wild. It was a police riot.
Yeah.
They actually not only charged into the crowd and hit pregnant women, there were people who were jumping over the freeway pass, which is a 20-foot drop to concrete to get away from them. And there is actually someplace a snippet on the radio because one of the reporters went down there and was screaming, saying, "This is what's happening, this is what's happening." And Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, was one of the people on the flathead making announcements, and it was a real riot. And as you see on that issue that you're talking about, because of the photography back then, it almost looked like something from a horror film, like where they used to put chocolate syrup over somebody's face, to look like blood because it was black and white, but it was actually blood.
And these were not. These were photos taken by just participants in the demonstration,
right.
and the Freep became like a central clearinghouse for that.
But
you might have had staffers doing those photos, but a lot of them just came from people you never met before.
Let me bring something to the fore here. If you could imagine that there were cell phones back in that day, son, that would have been broadcast. You hear this expression from back in things you participated in, where the whole world is watching. That would have gone viral in an instant. That would have been a free press.
Not in Cairo, Egypt.
Is that we're not Mike.
It's picking it up pretty good, I think.
Oh,
I got
okay.
2 things going. I need to interject about that because we had a little thing, I think the day last Thursday, the day Rod McEwen left his body.
Yeah.
And I found that out from Ted Quinn as we were getting ready to leave, say goodbye to Art. But I just found out my good friend from Idlewild, Danny Rubin, had just left his body that day as well. Danny Rubin and Bruce Denny from Idlewild both wrote an article about that Century City Plaza. They were high school chums, these two brothers. And that was their first writing, I think, in the LA Free Press. The same issue that you did articles for about that Century City Plaza, LBJ, fiddling like Nero up on the plaza balcony as the pigs were beating up all the demonstrators below. So I'm sending out my prayers for Danny Rubin's good journey, and it's just ironic that if this gets talked about here today, him having just joined Rob McEwen on the other side. Also, I want to interject quickly that We had an amazing story from Art Kunkin on the way here. I wish we had recorded, but maybe you can talk a little bit about it. What another synchronous moment was I was telling them when I first moved to Desert Hot Springs around 2000, that park around the corner was called People's Park. And then Paul Krassner here, and they promptly changed the name to Veterans Park.
Well,
You know what I'm talking about, right? The park right there at Palm and Mission Springs was called People's Park.
Mission Lakes, you mean, right?
Mission Lakes, yeah. It was called People's Park when I first moved here.
Oh,
And then you moved here, and they changed the name
Yeah.
promptly to Veterans Park.
And then there's the Riverside San Bernardino branch of Veterans for Peace is on I guess
February 16th.
Oh yeah, you know about that. They're having President's Day,
Oh, good.
and I'm getting the lifetime award from them.
Are you going to physically go?
It's in the afternoon, and it's at some I forget where it is, but I'll bring it down.
In Riverside?
No, in Desert Hot Springs.
Oh, in Desert Hot Springs. Great.
Or maybe Palm Springs.
February 16th. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
So, you know, I told them, I was never a veteran. I was a veteran of the peace movement.
I was a veteran of the drug war.
It applies to anything.
But then Art was telling us about, I said, what, he mentioned being a veteran, told us a whole story about when he was in the Army, and they sent him, he was in base camp, and command sent him a letter accusing him of being a socialist, and they removed him from, not active duty, but they put him into a different classification, and on, and he ended up becoming this amazing story, how he took over with this sergeant as the clerk. Sergeant went ill, and he became an acting sergeant. Our stories are incredible, but he met this one guy in the Army that helped. He started helping people to get their deferments or to get out, to get out of the Army, and he got an honorable discharge, or he actually got a dishonorable discharge with a certain classification.
No, I got an honorable discharge.
Honorable discharge, even
under general conditions.
and he got his VA benefits and everything. Then he told us about this guy. One guy he helped in the Army is the one that ended up, if I'm not mistaken, giving you the narc list later on at the Free Press.
Oh, no.
How did that happen?
That kid just walked in the office.
Okay, but you were talking about another list of not just the narcs. You were telling Deb-or and I about on the way here about the list of the FBI and the sheriffs. 1,600 different names and addresses that guy gave you.
43 pages.
43.
No, that
How many
was-
pages?
It's getting mixed up.
Okay, I'm mixing up your stories. You got from the guy that you helped in the Army.
No, this was a guy who called me up, and they were printing stuff for the police. And they were collating my file from 5 different agencies, and he was printing up copies that night of my reports from the FBI, police, sheriffs, CIA, and I think the Army, 5 agencies.
That's right.
642 pages. That was my file.
Can you clarify that? What do you mean that was your file?
That was the 5 files these agencies had. It totaled 642 pages.
So, Art, were you ever?
Wait, what about this file now? How did it relate to you?
It was about me.
It was about you.
Right.
And he gave you a copy.
He was printing a copy for all the different agencies, the 5 different agencies.
About you, and he gave
Yeah.
you a copy.
Yeah,
You still have that.
yeah, somewhere.
Somewhere in your
Were you
file.
ever put in jail or anything for that?
What?
Were you
ever
put in jail
for
the list
the
of?
list? You sued
But
for
do you
25
think if
million.
it happened now that in a similar kind of the
It wasn't
current
illegal.
context, you would
It
want?
wasn't illegal then to publish that kind of list.
Right.
It is now. They passed a law.
Because of you.
Well, actually, the law, Art was correct in printing it because they were public servants. What was eventually ruled illegal was printing the home addresses. In other words, you can print that they work for the public. You can print their name, you can print their rank, you can so on and so on. You just can't reveal their home addresses. And
phone numbers.
and when Art did that, he did issue something after that, which was an apology to the NARCs for printing the home addresses. He did.
Well, yeah, I that was a personal apology.
Yes, of course. Yes, no, it was. And,
Sorry if I offended you.
and as far as files go,
Because, let me tell you another episode
yeah,
of that. I'm trying to think of what the situation was. My daughter got busted for smoking in my house. And I wasn't there, so I wasn't involved at all.
How old was she?
I have to go and look and see. But I met her probation agent or whoever was in charge of her case, and he was the one who financed the NARCs in their lawsuit against me. And so we had a little discussion there. And he was very nice. He didn't use it against my daughter. I mean, eventually the charges against my daughter got dismissed, I think. And it was kind of a little...
Wow.
I'd have to
Small-
recall
small
my
world.
whole episode of that.
and you were talking about five.
But you know, you guys started off on a whole different tone.
About journalism?
What concerns me the radicals always believed American capitalism was going to collapse. And it hasn't. And the question is, what is the future of American capitalism?
Is it a question?
Yeah.
American capitalism has collapsed. If
Has
you-
what?
Has
Has
collapsed.
collapsed.
If you read the definition of capitalism, it is when you invest capital to create a product. And in this day and age, actually more so a couple of years ago than now, what is actually happening is a shoveling of money and more of a smoke and mirrors creation of it. When you talk about stocks and, you know, the stock market is back and, you know, up in the 16,000s now, whereas a couple of years ago it was down half of that now. Those are creations. Those are paper creations. They're, with the manufacturing base disappearing in America, you really don't have capitalism. And one of the things that has occurred from that, and you saw in the Occupy movement, is that people were talking about the corporations ruling the economy because they have the greatest portion of ownership. So capitalism, which was something of the people and for the people, where anybody could create a business and create a product and go into business, yes, that's true to some extent. And there are people who hit fabulous numbers by creating something that functions off the internet or goes viral as far as a product goes. But by far, capitalism, in my opinion, is gone. But what I think that you see is a resistance to say that. It's like, for instance, the same argument that's defeating Obamacare, which is that it's socialized medicine. You have to remember that the AMA hired two PR geniuses to create a backlash against Medicare and so on by calling it socialized medicine. Socialism is so abhorrent to the public that they will not admit that sharing among people is perhaps something on a higher plane. Now, because Paul's in this interview, of course, he came out with a famous bumper sticker. And remember, the public was right, you can say it. Go ahead.
Fuck capitalism.
No, communism.
Communism.
Okay, and what was happening there?
He put out the bumper sticker, "Fuck communism," and some college guys did something with it.
Well, in that day, it went viral. People were so against communism that they wanted to have the bumper sticker out there, but they were so opposed to the word, the other word, that they were torn. But it still came out. Today, you cannot say you have a phrase, "caring is sharing," but it would take a PR genius to say, socialism is pretty much caring is sharing. And I came down to Art one day, in our fancy office down at Wendy's at Pilot Truck Stop, and I said to Art, I'm torn about this because I've been capitalist all my life. I've been in business since I was 14, but this is doing terrible things to people because it is not true capitalism. And it is regulated so that the people who can participate in the finer points and the bigger promise of capitalism is gone. Right now they predict by 2015, almost 50% of the wealth of
Owned by 1%.
1%. Okay, well that's not capitalism. Okay, and if it doesn't mean,
Capitalism as Marx described it.
right. Exactly right.
Capitalism as Marx described.
Exactly right, but it is not the American dream of capitalism. But the people in America don't want to stand up and say, "Oh, we don't want capitalism," because it's so anti-American. And also, what they're robbing themselves of is the thought that they can go from where they are, which by and large is impoverished, to a better place. If you look at all of America's statistics, which is a whole different subject, compared to the rest of the world, you can see how capitalism has not worked in favor of the American public. There is definitely a change coming to that system. You mentioned that Occupy was hurt by a concentrated effort to take. Yes, there are 18 cities that were online, and there was a movement to shut down Occupy. But Occupy was out there because capitalism had, by and large, failed those people.
What do you think about that, Paul?
I didn't know it was destroyed. I thought it was still going on. You mean,
No, no,
you mean the Koch brothers?
Capitalism.
Oh, you mean Occupy?
You mean
No,
or
or
capitalists? You mean the Koch brothers are capitalists?
Yes, they are. Okay, they are, but not by the definition that Americans were raised thinking capitalism will free them and give them the opportunity to all be rich. The Koch brothers operate with capital in a much different fashion than the ordinary individual can access. And that's, you can take a look at what Wall Street does and calls capitalism. You can take a look at the banks that are too big to fail, how they've been protected by capitalism. It's not the capitalism that is.
No, but
Well, you better go back to Elizabeth Warren.
Well, Elizabeth Warren understood what she's trying to do is cure the ills that this misuse of capitalism has created. For instance, everybody that is financed and broke, in debt to credit cards, she's up there as a consumer advocate saying, you know what you enticed them to was not what was promised. Okay, and capitalism as a word is a front for something that no longer exists in America. And it's unfortunate.
Propaganda. I mean, we got a little propaganda stuff?
Yeah, we're either confused or misdirected, or we actually think that we're informed and that it still exists, but it does
What
not.
you have is state capitalism.
Yeah, federal capitalism. Yeah, everything but capitalism of the populace.
But capitalism as private ownership by everybody, with everybody having that possibility, that's gone.
Well,
But
you
it's
still.
still
Here, let me tell
socialism.
you how perverted this is. We on your
The
forms for
state
credit.
owns the capital.
The
State
corporate.
controls
but-
the capital.
But up differently.
For
It's
instance,
split up by corporations now, not by countries.
Well, it's a world economy, but like for instance, when you check off a credit form, it says, do you rent or do you own? Well, if you check off own, this is how perverted this has gotten, and you own a $200,000 house that you went to the bank to get your mortgage, and you were $140,000 in debt, you don't own it. But we believe that we do. It's smoke and mirrors. It is not, yes, it's our home. Yes, if somebody tries to break in the door, it's our domicile. But in truth, it's not. And that's why I'm saying that it certainly needs to be either put back into gear or, and as horrid as this sounds, and believe me, like I said, I had my own business at 14, I still have my own businesses. Socialism, with the populace being as down and out as so many of them are, you need to take the onus off that word. There are public works programs, that's socialism. There is general health care, that's socialism. There's Medicare, that's socialism. And they're fine programs. There's the lunch programs at school, okay? But the moment you put that word on it, it sounds like it is a terrible thing only because it is on the opposite side of the fence of what we believe capitalism to be. And believe me, I'm not an advocate. I mean, I must sound like one.
An advocate
for socialism. But I'm just saying that if you believe that capitalism is what is in the minds of many, it is not true, in my opinion.
Well, so our cultural discourse is weak. We're not using the discourse to cut through the veneer or the audio mural.
Well, okay, let's go back to the original pearl of this conversation about the free press. There are hundreds of thousands of people who are on the net arguing, making that same argument about what capitalism is, how the banks should be penalized, how the money that has been, the state or the government has penalized those institutions but never returned it to the people who actually lost the capital. There are many, many people. That is a free press. They're angry. They're out there. They type every day. So there is a free press. Okay. There is unfortunately still a mainstream press,
right?
And that mainstream press actually, as you said, is not being watched by the younger generation. But that mainstream message is still traveling through the center of our brain. There are mainstream messages that I could give you that, let me think, what's one of those? Don't leave home without it.
Got milk?
Okay? Hefty, hefty, hefty.
Well,
there's many, many messages that have just been
Everything else
planted.
is priceless.
Yes, okay? And those are new, but if you talk about 50 years ago, what was the opposite seltzer one? Pop, pop, fizz, fizz? Right? Yeah, you still remember it, okay? I'm just saying that the same thing has happened. There's a new word, meme, that with capitalism, we believe that it's there. It is not. Honest to God, you can argue with me, but I will hold that what you are calling capitalism is not the original message. It's like you saying that this is blue and my saying it's white. You really do see it as blue, but art, it's white. It has changed to a point where that is not an operating premise of our economy. And it should be looked at, and people shouldn't be afraid of change, which they are. There are certain things that, like for instance, we think we have the best health care. In the list of nations, we're 17th on stillborn births, even though in this country, because the medical community is so concerned about lawsuits, they don't even have natural births as much as they have a high percentage of cesarean births, which are safer and date-wise, I can fit my golf game in, I know when it's coming, and so on and so on. But yet, to look at that, an American would be astonished. What? We have the best healthcare in the world. No, we have I was at a dinner, I think I mentioned it to you. I was sitting next to an assistant at DA, and we were having a conversation. But unfortunately, everything he said to me, I was on the other side. He said, well, we have the best, look what we're graduating. I went, well, India is turning out 300,000 software engineers, and they speak 2 languages, and they work at 1/3 to 1/5 the price. Okay, we got to the next thing, healthcare. We got to the next thing, And he actually, at this community dinner, said, if I don't like America, I should leave. And it wasn't that I didn't like America. That is what America is. If you don't want to look at it, that is something you have to understand. Now I want to go back to the free press, because this is about the free press. What this was built on was saying things that other people, the mainstream was not. I mentioned to Art again, saying that when the LA Times was asked to run an ad that had the word homosexual in it, it was not for a party, it was not for a tryst, it was for a seminar, they wouldn't do it because they thought the public would be offended.
What year?
I'm going to say 68
Yeah, it was like
or
the
so.
60s, okay.
And there was around the Times building a line of, and I don't know if they were homosexuals or not, carrying placards. Okay? Well, the LA Times didn't lean out the window and take a picture of that. The LA Free Press did. Okay? But this does what is needed today and which is happening. People saying, you know what? You see it, you hear it, but it's not really there.
Counterculture journalism is still alive. Now, bear with me for a moment, please, while I relay Seth Meyers' joke from last night's late night show. Said something about Obama and was at a dinner with the Dalai Lama recently, and he went out of his way to avoid the Dalai Lama and said, I suspect there's some Obama Lama drama.
Well, listen, I haven't said much, if you notice.
I was just going to redirect it back to you.
Okay, I mean, you know, that's why we came here.
Well,
I don't care about socialism or capitalism.
okay, this is exactly what I was just going to say.
Let
The
him
Dalai
talk, let
Lama.
him talk.
Well, I want
Let
to.
him say what it is.
I want to redirect it right back to him with what I was going to say, because I was going to say the Dalai Lama has claimed that you take all the isms, we were talking about isms on Bob Marley's birthday, and he's famous for saying sick and tired of the ism schism. And the Dalai Lama said, take the best out of all the isms, communism, socialism, capitalism, blah, 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 and you will have a perfect society if you do that. But recently I saw you talking at the Comic-Con convention afterwards or something. Somebody asked you at the end of the talk on YouTube, is anything giving you hope still these days? And you said, Occupy movement is giving you hope.
Yeah.
Is there, now I think Occupy is kind of squashed. Is there anything else still
What does
giving
this
you
have
hope
to do
for
with the LA Free Press? I mean, that's why we're here, I thought.
Well, it's also
I
an
don't know
interview
why
with
we're
you.
here.
What?
I don't know why we're here.
Sorry, but we're getting your view now about journalism and how to change things, which is what the Free Press and Realist set out to do, was to call the corporatocracy on its BS and create a fair and equal society for all people. One of the things they wanted to do, right? Isn't that one of the things you wanted to do anyway?
That art wants to do?
Well, okay, what the Free Press wanted to do, what the Realists wanted to do, call the society BS what it was and wake people up to the feelings of our Western dysfunctional society, for lack of a better
Well,
word.
yeah, that's a lot of feedback I got was, and still do, was that it woke people up. And I'm sure that the Freep did the same thing, you know, because the truth can wake people up, you know, especially now, you know, when you have a propaganda medium like Fox, where people don't watch it for anything but that. And, you know, so when Obama had his State of the Union press, there were two cherry pickers. One had MSNBC, which would pick all of the good things Obama said. Fox showed all, criticized all the bad things he said in the speech. They were both right, but each one had their own agenda, and if Fox is as much promoted by the Koch brothers and by Murdoch and all of that, you know, if that's not capitalism, it might as well be.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the labels are irrelevant.
And money talk. Money talk.
So, you know, when all of the underground professional. It was the most
Most consistent.
Consistent in what?
Every week.
Oh, well, the others did were at weeklies. But the other ones were like the Berkeley Bar was essentially political. The San Francisco Oracle was essentially psychedelic, and it was when LSD became illegal in 1966. The Oracle realized that psychedelics had to do with the law, for better or worse, and the Berkeley Bar realized that marijuana was was politically a crime, and so that kind of made both of them. It raised the consciousness of the papers that were raising consciousness, and that was the function of to raise the consciousness of people, because that's where it started, it's understandable that you get angry at what's going on, but it doesn't accomplish anything except you have to meditate stronger.
Thank you. My new non-guru.
So, people wonder what happened to, like, I forget the name of the cartoonist, but the black thing.
Boondocks.
Yeah.
Boondocks?
That wasn't in the Free Press. That's what we're talking about.
Oh yeah, Ron Cobb.
Yeah,
Ron Cobb.
yeah. And people would clip a cartoon from that and put it on the refrigerator. I mean, because it summed up more than some articles would do. It's just the way Garrett True does with begins with a D.
That's very.
See how I read that? Memory features. I remember the first letter.
Yeah.
Then the rest will come. And it had Harlan Ellison doing a column about television called the
Glass Tea.
Yeah, right. And it had
Lawrence
Lipton as the Holy Barbarian, and his son was is Jimmy Lipton. Nancy, is that right? Was Jimmy Lipton the son of Lawrence Lipton?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you see
Who's Jimmy Lipton?
Jimmy Lipton has a program on Bravo about the actor studio,
Yeah.
where he interviews actors. So, but anyway, there were and there were. Did Bukowski write for the Freep, I think?
Charles Bukowski definitely
Yeah.
had a weekly column.
So it also provided.
Notes from a Dirty Old Man.
Huh?
Notes from a Dirty Old
Yeah,
Man.
right. And so it was like a model for other papers, but each.
But who was this Rumble Foreskin?
That was when I had my radio show. That was who I said it was. I tried to get it in the phone book. They wouldn't do it. They said we could put Foreskin Foreskin Rumple, but they would. And so then I used that as the name of the column.
Do you remember the different things he would write about as Rumble Foreskin?
Oh, it was a lot of when I was conspiracies, whatever struck me,
Just kind of the realist in the LA Free Press, a little bit.
Well, in terms of I wasn't censored, yeah. Free Press.
Right.
The Free Press.
Right.
No, I don't think you ever changed anything that I wrote.
It wasn't satire, Paul, was it?
Some of it was, and some of it wasn't.
The only problem I had with writers was when Bukowski and Liza Williams broke up and began to attack each other in the paper.
Hilarious. Did she work in your office also? Or?
She had a column.
Bukowski wasn't in the office, no.
But she was, yeah.
But the two of them were going together and they started arguing in their columns.
That's a good
It's like
story.
Norman Mailer and other writers for the Village Voice, they're the same thing, internal.
How long did the Village Voice last approximately? Does anyone know?
Still going.
Yeah, it's still going.
Yeah, but it's,
Well, then that's probably the longest going one, because I was gonna say, with your starting in the 50s, and I think your final issue of the Realist was about 2000, I picked up a copy for half a million a day. That was a good 45 years or so.
oh, with an 11-year hiatus.
11-year hiatus.
People just thought their copy was late in the mail.
But Art had a good 10 years.
It's like when they have a sign open 24 hours and you get there, it's closed, and they go, well, we didn't mean continuously.
Right, yeah.
Go on, Art.
We've gone away from the beginning of this discussion.
It's all, we started with journalism, now we're ending it with journalism, actually.
No, I just,
And counterculture journalism is still alive. Capitalism, Nazism, and schism aside, counterculture journalism is thriving in one form or another. Are you still writing for the High Times magazine?
No, I got dropped by them.
Oh, sorry. Are you currently writing any columns or anything else like that?
Oh, well, I'm compiling a thing of 50 years of investigative satire.
Great. For a book?
Yeah.
Great.
And
Do you have the title yet?
that's the title.
That's the title? Great. It's also a
great
description.
title, great title.
Great title. It's a descriptive
And,
title.
I just had a book published a few months ago, called Patty Hearst and the Twinkie Murders, A Tale of Two Trials, both of which I covered. And then
What book put that in the title?
I
Hardy
did.
Milk.
There was one that had the Twinkie Murders in it.
Sex. The
Sex,
Twinkie-
sex, drugs, and the Twinkie Murders. But that was a little publisher who went out of business.
Oh.
And I thought the two of them those two trials were relevant to that. It revealed that Sing Hu, the head of the Sudanese Liberation Army, was a informant and for the FBI.
Oh.
wow.
And Colston Westbrook was he was in charge in Vietnam of the Phoenix program, which was assassinated. And so he came, so there was stuff like that people don't know, and Patty Hearst too. There are things that people didn't know. So that book, and then this coming fall, there's Fantagraphics publisher, and they're going to do the best cartoons from the Realist. So I'm the king of rehash. But people are curious.
Speaking of rehash, this would be the 45th anniversary this May 4th, I'm guessing, of the Kent State shootings. The Kent State.
Something like that, yeah.
And so that's significant. A lot of things are coming around with the 45th anniversary of from 1970 this year. Do you have any kind of update on the daughter and the sister of the one killed?
Yeah, she's still pushing it hard.
She's still trying to get justice for her sister.
Yeah.
What are their names again? I don't know. If you have the first initial, I'll remember it all. Laura, I want to say,
Yeah.
the woman that was killed at Kent State.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. No, she's like dedicating herself to that.
Yeah, I know you were.
But the thing I was saying was that the free press was I don't know if any of the papers had that amount or the content. The content was important, and as you say, it was consistent. It was 10 years. Yeah, and it was respected.
Not by the narcs.
Well,
That's not true.
Oh.
That's not true.
Well, no, that's true, but your daughter's story, that one cop did show you some respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to add some figures into that, the paper, which had 8 pages, then went to 16 pages, eventually went to 64 pages.
64 pages.
That's massive.
Well,
Two
it's bigger.
sections.
It's bigger.
Yeah,
It's bigger than 64.
That's
You would
big.
know.
Okay. And I have,
Some issues over 100.
and I did see.
I remember how we printed it. We couldn't print it in one section.
Right, there were 3 sections.
But the
at
printing
some
was
point.
legible, as opposed to say some of the things where they were so psychedelic that Mort Saul said you had to have a translator.
Mark Saul said,
Interesting.
for a Fillmore poster. You absolutely
Rosetta
do.
Stone.
Yeah.
You have to look
That's
at a
one of my
certain
favorite.
angle to see what the concert was.
Right, yeah, some concerts, you know, with
Interesting.
the Peter Max type letters, you have to have 2 feet away from you before you can figure
This
those
is a very,
things out.
very, very legible one here, the
What are you sharing?
Love-in,
Oh.
Your legible printing,
West Coast Love-in.
Well, that's
very
a-
readable.
very interesting.
Well, the Peanut Butter Conspiracy actually was at the first Love-in that was held. And
This is probably the ad for it. The Love Revolution, well, that's an
No.
ad for their album. Here's a Ron Cobb, instead of LSD 25, why does it say RCD 25?
What did that stand for? I forget. RC.
Ron Cobb Drawings, 25 cents.
Oh, that's not yourself.
No, 25 Ron Cobb Drawings for $1.50. Wow, that's a clever. He's still alive in Australia.
I didn't know he was living there.
Yeah, he's down under.
Huh.
This is where the LSD discoverer, Augustus Stanley Owsley, spent his last years before he crashed into a tree a couple years ago.
It was Owsley's wife who was a chemist.
Still,
Owsley
Oh.
didn't make LSD himself, his wife did.
right.
Wow, this was like Big Eyes.
It's like Big Eye, oh, the painter for Big Eyes.
Yeah.
So Owsley, are you calling Owsley a fraud? I don't know.
boy.
I don't know.
He was marketing it, but his wife was producing.
I thought he was a chemist in
No.
Watts. He had the
I'm
Grateful
sure,
Dead.
I'm sure of that.
When he was managing the Grateful Dead, doing the
Yeah.
big wall of sound, he was manufacturing acid up in the ceiling in the attic, and all the powder was falling down into the house. And so the Grateful Dead and him were on LSD like 24/7, 7 days a week.
But it had his name to it, not his wife's.
Yeah, right.
Oh, like
Great
the
idea.
Big Eyes. Okay,
Yeah, ours.
very good. Good point. There's a story.
yes,
waiting.
I'm just thinking it's the same thing.
We'll do a whole
Seriously,
screenplay and a movie, and we'll all be
Huge news to
gazillionaires.
me.
Yeah, well, that's reality.
He was credited with being a sound engineer and a chemist. And
I'll never forget.
I'll look into it for you.
Behind every great man is, what's the saying? A very great
A
woman.
drug pusher?
A bigger woman, bigger woman, a greater woman.
There was one time when Owsley stuffed my pockets full of LSD. And
Before 66 or after?
there was a whole story connected with that, I can't remember.
But
Oh
do you think it
no,
was
Sonny,
before-
let him.
I didn't think derail him. Do you think it was
Come on
before
to it.
66 when it became illegal, or after 66?
Yeah.
After.
Yeah, I was thinking.
So you've got your pocket stuffed full of LSD and
Senior moment.
Possibly a drug moment.
This has
He
been.
had a shopping bag full of it.
Wow. The Grateful Dead wrote a song about him called Alice D. Millionaire, from the headline of him getting busted. LSD millionaire busted in Haight-Ashbury or wherever. This has been a great talk.
Somehow
Yeah.
Great talk.
we
Well-
started off this discussion.
Well,
on Free Press. Is there still a Free Press? And I would
No.
suggest Free Press is maybe.
We actually.
Before that.
This
we
is-
actually started off the conversation with Lenore Kandel on the Love Book.
A little after that, yeah.
So in
Journalism,
between.
the war on journalism,
War on journalism.
and is there still a free press?
What's the future?
Well,
Don't ask her to predict. She'll do your astrological chart, but she won't predict.
And I was hoping that what we would hear is more from Paul about how either the LA Free Press helped in what he was doing, like for instance when he was in the Yippie Party, or created it, the LA Free Press covered everything about that. So I don't know if you considered the LA Free Press. I'm sure you considered it a supporter. I don't know if you think it was a contributor to what you were doing.
Well, it was one of, the Yippies held a press conference, one with the mainstream press and one with the alternative press, and obviously the Free Press was part of the, and I don't remember if you got a press release or what, but it gave publicity to the Yippies are coming, and
It sure covered the Chicago 7 trial.
Chicago 8.
I was going to just say, were you the 8th one?
No, Bobby Seale was the fifth one, but then
You were like the secret.
I was an unindicted. I was so disappointed.
You were like the 9th or 10th.
So it was. So the Free Press was part of, I guess, the UPS and also the Liberation.
Oh, they created the UPS.
I started the UPS. I mean, I was one of the 5 people there.
What was it? John Wilcock was there, or Tom Prasad.
Wilcock, Tom Prasad.
And the story was, I never knew if it was a gag or not, but we saw a truck going by, it said UPS. And,
That's great.
But I don't know if that was just a hype or it really happened.
Say that again.
They saw a UPS truck go by, or you guys saw a UPS truck go by, and said, "Oh, let's call it that."
Oh.
He doesn't know if it was a jag, as he calls it, like a chain yanker.
No, but there was something like that.
Wow, what a great story!
There was something like that. Why we call it the UPS.
Wow.
There was a guy from New York. What's his name?
What's the first letter?
Not a T for the guy from New York.
He was from New York. Not Rex Weiner.
No.
Who else would have been? Somebody from one of the from Liberation News Service? No, that wouldn't have been.
No.
Yes.
That was, Tom Prasad was doing that one.
Yeah.
I can't think of who it was.
But anyway, it was a syndication. The countercultural version of Associated Press. And it was.
I don't think we've even said it out loud. United Press Syndicate.
Yeah, right. But anyway, it served that purpose.
Underground Press.
Thank you.
That's right.
Underground Press
Yeah.
Syndicate. Thank you.
Yeah, right. And it was functional. And Liberation News Service had
Who was the one from New York? That's
was it Blue?
Huh?
Blue?
no,
Mungo, Ray Mungo?
no. Remember Ray? It'll come back.
Yeah.
Jerry Rubin.
No, they were written about. They were. There's a book coming out, a biography of Jerry Rubin, in fact, and it's. I asked the guy who's doing it, what are you going to call it? He said, well, Jerry was famous for his book Do It, so he wants to call this one Did It, and then of course a subtitle, which it would need. And it was because there were 6 books about Abby, but none about Jerry, except his own. So they felt there was a need for it.
Yeah, good.
So even that, there is, the thing that's really interesting to me blossoming now.
Yes.
You know, organic food, environmentalism, and all of these things is that we had in our publications. You know, before people even knew that there were problems.
The dirty hippies were right.
That's what it comes to.
And what I was saying before was that those issues, if you republish them, they are
Still problems.
Yes, and I think that what has happened in this
important.
is in this interval is these people have been distracted and refracted and so on, but now because they can get back up and say what they want to freely, those issues, because they are still concerns, are rising to the top again. There's no question, I think, that many of the things that the hippies were talking about and what the hippies believed in, if they didn't have a united voice in that, are issues that, you know, aren't going to go away and need to be resolved. I mean, there is no planet B. We need to make this one work.
Well, there is for the 1%. They got Mars colonies and underground cities and all those conspiracies. But
Wait, do you believe that?
of course.
Literally?
And chemtrails.
Oh, well, see, there's arguments about that.
And I believe that vaccinations are bad.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I lost it. What's this?
He says there's no planet B. We have to take care of this planet. I said, well, not for the 1%, because they have underground cities and colonies going into Mars. But I'm digressing myself, because I was going to say something else I have to think of. This has really been a powerful meeting.
Today, if you can recall a particular issue in the 60s that you think should be front and center today, you know, like for instance, you had Tom Hayden's manifesto, you know, of what he thought, and this comes to mind because I had a professor ask me, I'm in a master's program, and we happen to be doing something about social inequality, and I go, oh, terrific, let me jump in on that conversation. Tom Hayden had written what his concerns were as a member of the SDS, as a member of the Yippie Party. What issue were you concerned about then that you could be just as concerned about now? Something come to the top?
Well, I just think there were changes. Then African Americans were not allowed to marry out of their race, and the Supreme Court did that. So now it's same-sex couples who have the same problem that blacks went through. So it's just different forms that things.
Are you serious? Was there a law saying that black people could not marry outside of their race?
Yeah, miscegenation.
I had no idea.
And it wasn't that far ago. I remember I was publishing and I thought, I knew I wouldn't do it, but I felt like if the Supreme Court didn't get rid of that law, I wouldn't have done it, but I felt like I would leave the country because that was so against the Constitution and against the First Amendment particularly. So you know, the bottom line was freedom, and then there were all these subdivisions of it, and subdivision of gay marriages, subdivision of legalizing marijuana, and there are all those issues that now are coming to the forefront. And people then thought, okay, well, not nuclear power, then maybe coal, but coal is just as bad, you know. And but people are aware. I mean, I think that this is the time now when I think it's like the same kind of explosion globally that was in the 60s that's happening again because people see the hypocrisy and addictions and inhumanity, and there's still, you know, so it's good that two states have recreational sex. I'm sorry, that's a recreational marijuana, and it's a false distinction because you know, between medical and recreational, because in a certain sense all marijuana is medical because it relaxes you and so much disease is caused by stress. So that it could be looked at that way.
That was a direct quote from Dennis Perone, who helped create Prop 215.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but the thing is, you know, it's good that Washington and
Colorado.
has that, but you know, I mean, I would be satisfied until there's amnesty for anybody in prison.
Drug war prisoners.
Yeah,
Right.
they're prisoners of war, in the sense that you know what fascism is. You know, punishment without crime. I mean, that's what fascism boils down to.
If I might, before you go too far afield, back in those days, the civil rights issue was about blacks. And really, the civil rights issue, I think, right now, or a couple of years ago, was about gays. Okay? In fact, when we ran the first story, and this is incredible, just like what Art's saying about Auschwitz, everybody thinks that the Stonewall Democrats, you know, came from the Stonewall incident, but 2 years before that, there was a huge parade in LA. It started there, but if you look at the signs were clearly civil rights items, you know, give us, you know, grant us dignity, you know. And so the gay movement, to me, is the civil rights issue. And I think that's soon going to turn into, you know, the Hispanic issue. And then, like I said, eventually,
Right, but
the
the,
whites.
the comparison is that just as it's a false distinction between recreational pot and medical pot, you know, then next there'll be recreational abortions. But the comparison now is, in terms of gays, that it's another false distinction, whether a gay person was born that way or chose that way. What the difference is irrelevant. It's just a form of continuing discrimination.
Right.
Right.
So it's freedom generally in answer to your question, and that and then there are all these subdivisions.
Okay, so the 60s, right, you're saying the 60s issue that's still central is personal freedom?
Basically, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And well, yeah, I mean, it can be a group too. You know, there are organizations which COINTELPRO love to
Dissolve.
yeah, like you know, there were murders now as then, you know, what's his name? Nancy. What's the name of the Black Panther who was killed?
Fred Hampton?
Fred Hampton.
Chicago.
He was murdered in his sleep because a provocateur for the FBI had she wouldn't give him poison or anything, but somehow it was put in the drinking. I mean, so he was killed, and people get killed now. I mean,
How recent was that?
well, that was in 1968,
Right.
I think.
Nine.
69. That's right. And